According to Greek mythology, the last to join the mighty Olympians was a god who broke boundaries. He turned strangers into companions, grief into ritual, but also condemned any resistance with madness. I'm Nikos, speaking to you from Greece, and today we witness the rise of the last Olympian, the twice-born god of joy and madness, or as the Greeks knew him, Dionysus. In the ancient kingdom of Thebes once lived a beautiful mortal princess named Semele. As often happened, her grace did not go unnoticed by Zeus, who often visited her in the form of a handsome man. Their union soon bore fruit, and Semele became pregnant. But the ever-watchful Hera eventually discovered her husband's affair, and the pregnancy of the princess left her in anguish. Taking the form of her elderly nurse Veroi, the queen of the gods whispered doubt in Semele's ear. If her lover was truly Zeus, why did he appear as a mortal? He should come as a god. The deceived princess then asked her lover for a solemn oath on the river Styx to grant her any wish. The god agreed, but was horrified when Semele made her request. She desired to see, just once, the mighty god in his true form. Bound by his word, Zeus revealed himself in thunder and blazing lights. No mortal could bear that sight. Poor Semele burned, and amid the flames the unborn child might have perished, but the ever-quick Hermes snatched the fetus to his father. In a wild act of parental love, Zeus sewed the infant into his own thigh. Thus, in time, was born a god unlike any other, Dionysus, the twice-born, of woman and of Zeus, already marked as a bridge between mortal and divine. His early life was far from peaceful. Zeus knew Hera's hatred would haunt the boy. He disguised Dionysus as a girl and sent Hermes to spirit him away to the house of Ino, Semele's sister, who, together with her husband Athamas and their 2 sons, welcomed the child as family. But Hera did not abandon her chase. Eventually she found out the truth and struck Athamas with madness. The man killed his older son, and Ino, fleeing her deranged husband, leapt with a younger from a cliff into the sea. To save Dionysus, Hermes carried him to a secret place maps could not agree on, the mythical Mount Nysa. There the local nymphs nurtured him in a cave, helped by the jovial sage Silenus, a satyr who would become his foster father, tutor, and dearest companion. As for Ino, her sacrifice did not go unnoticed by the gods, and she was later immortalized as the sea goddess Leucothea. Years passed. Dionysus fell in love with a young satyr named Abelos. Unfortunately, their joy was brief. In a tragic accident, Abelos had his life stolen by a bull. The grieving god transformed his lover's body to a vine, which he then nurtured until it yielded grapes. From these grapes he made a discovery that would change the world. Dionysus produced wine. But Hera's wrath was yet to be spent. The queen of the gods eventually found him and inflicted madness upon the god himself, driving Dionysus away from Mount Nysa to wander aimlessly across the known world, crossing Greece, Egypt, and Syria. The god who would one day send others outside themselves first walked the earth himself outside every safe boundary. At last his journey led him to the distant Phrygia. It was there that he encountered Cybele, a powerful mother goddess worshipped by the locals, who finally cured him of his madness. Some say that Cybele was in truth Rhea, his grandmother and mother of Zeus herself. Inspired with a unique ways of worship in Phrygia, Dionysus began rites that would bear his name: music, dance, night farce, and ecstasy, that strange condition of stepping beyond the self. But the most central part of his cult was wine. The young god traveled, teaching mortals to cultivate the vine and to ferment its fruit. The substance was more than a symbol. On one hand, it brought joy, communion, and divine inspiration. on the other, indulgence and loss of control. Indeed, this civilizing gift was but a potent conduit to the divine, capable of altering perception, dissolving social boundaries, and opening a path to the god himself. According to a later folktale, on one of his long journeys to spread the art of winemaking, Dionysus found a young and tender grapevine. To protect it from being damaged, he carefully placed it in the skull of a small bird. The plant, however, soon outgrew its home. Seeing it needed a larger container, Dionysus moved it to the skull of a mighty lion. But the vine continued to grow, its roots again becoming exposed. As it grew to its full size, the god finally placed it in the skull of a donkey and carried it until he could plant it in the earth. So, said the story, wine affects us in 3 turns. A little makes us light and carefree as a bird. More makes us bold and powerful as a lion. Too much makes us stubborn and foolish as a donkey. Though wine is a gift from the gods, its powers and dangers must be understood and controlled by the people. As the god who comes, Dionysus traveled across the known world, inviting outcasts and honored alike. His followers, known as his Thiassos, were never quiet. Maenads crowned in ivy and fawnskin, satyrs with pipes and hooves, the poor beside the rich, the slave beside the citizen. For a night all were equal before the god who loosened their chains. And while many were liberated, there existed occasions when Dionysus was met with resistance. Some accounts say that, in the distant east, the Indians refused the gods and lived outside the cosmic order. Commanded by Zeus to bring civilization to their land, Dionysus, armed with his Thyrsus, led a unique army of Maenads and satyrs against the powerful King Dariades in a war that shook the very country, and Hera, still hating him, even took the Indian side. In one famous battle, Dionysus turned a nearby lake into wine, a gesture of both power and pity. Thirsty and unacquainted with the drink, the enemy soldiers drank deeply, fell asleep, and were bound without bloodshed. It took years, but the god managed to overthrow the barbarian King Dariades and end the Indian resistance. At last he taught the people the arts of civilization, left a governor to rule in peace, and moved on from the land. Returning to Greece, Dionysus arrived in Thrace and met resistance from the rigid King Lycurgos, who banned the god's rights, seized his followers, and tried to harm him. For his hubris, Dionysus punished Lycurgos terribly. The god cursed the entire land of Thrace to wither, and even inflicted divine madness on him. The mad king mistook his own son for a vine, the very plant he hated, and hacked him down with an axe. He was then captured by his subjects and taken to Mount Pangion, where man-eating horses devoured him. With Lycurgos gone, the god lifted the curse on Thrace and was finally worshipped by the people. Continuing his travels and spreading the ways of his cult, Dionysus at last returned to his homeland, Thebes. There, the local king Pentheus, the god's cousin, banned his worship and even had Dionysus chained, mistaking him for a priest. The god's vengeance would once again be absolute. Dionysus inflicted madness upon the women of Thebes, including the king's mother Agave. They abandoned the city and fled to Mount Cithaeron, where they became Maenads. Easily breaking his chains, Dionysus then tricked Pentheus into going up the mountain to spy on the women's ecstatic rites. But the king did not go unnoticed. In their frenzy, the Maenads mistook him for a lion. They fell upon him and tore him limb from limb. Agave herself lifted her son's head upon a thyrsus and returned to Thebes in triumph, until the god lifted the madness and grief arrived with understanding. Agave and her sisters were exiled for the horror they had committed. After Pentheus' death, Thebes finally acknowledged Dionysus and became a center of his worship. Dionysus later journeyed to the island of Naxos. Seeking passage, he approached a band of Tyrrhenian pirates. Taking him for a rich man's son, the pirates planned to kidnap him for a hefty ransom. But when they tried to bind him, the ropes fell away, leaving Dionysus calm and smiling. The helmsman Acoetes recognized the man's divine nature and urged his crewmates to treat him with reverence. But the captain ignored the warning, dismissing him as foolish. Suddenly the ship changed. Wine ran across the deck, vines sprang from the sails, and ivy twined the mast. Dionysus revealed his divine power and became a lion. Terrified, the sailors leaped overboard, only to be instantly transformed into dolphins. Acoetes alone was spared for his kindness and clear sight. Those and more were his punishments. But for all his terrors, Dionysus loved deeply. On Naxos he found Ariadne, the princess of Crete, who had been abandoned by the hero Theseus after she had saved him from the labyrinth. Dionysus loved Ariadne and made her his wife, a tender, fruitful marriage that gave them many children. Grown to the full of his power, Dionysus then accomplished a feat almost impossible even for an Olympian. The god descended to the underworld, stood before Hades himself, and bargained for his lost mother's return. The lord of the underworld agreed, and Semele returned to the world of the living by the name of Thyone. Dionysus had done the impossible. Haunted since childhood, he managed to escape Hera's wrath, spread his influence across the known world, and even break the very cycle of life and death. The god finally ascended to Mount Olympus and was welcomed into the pantheon of the Olympians, embodying the life force that both creates and destroys. Thyone and Ariadne were both immortalized to stand at his side for eternity. The god who comes had at last come home, and the Order of Olympus made room for joy. If you made it this far, I just want to say thank you. It means the world to me to share with you the myths and stories of my homeland. If there's one thing to take from today's tale, let it be this. Joy without measure becomes ruin, but measure without joy turns the soul to stone. Walk between them, and life will sing with you. And if you enjoyed this video, please stay tuned for the next episode of A Greek Mythology. Until next time, take care.